4th, 1946 in Appalachia. I'm from Gatlinburg, Gatlinburg, Tennessee. So all my family's from there. The reason I tell you my birth date is in March of 1946. My mother was pregnant with me. I was born in June, and in March of that same year, my 12-year-old sister got ran over and killed by a drunk driver, which caused my mother so much stress that her amniotic fluid broke, and I stayed. They gave me, I guess from what my sisters say, a very small chance of being born in the first place. But, you know, I stayed in a dry sack for the next 3 months, came out, was healthy other than I looked like a wrinkled up old prune. That's what my sisters tell me. And there's no baby pictures of me. They said I was so ugly that they didn't want to take no baby pictures. They weren't allowed to bathe me in water whatsoever, so I had to be rubbed down with baby oil, and that's the beginning. From there, my life was kind of normal all the way up until I was 6 years old. We were all church-going people. My mother and father were great Christians. My father was a deacon of the church. My mother was a good Christian lady. Had two uncles who were Southern Baptist preachers. And at the age of 6, we all had a swimming hole up in Tennessee called Stinky Creek. And all the guys in the neighborhood, there was probably 15 or 20 of us, we all used to swim in this place called Stinky Creek. But because of the birth problems, I had a weakened immune system, which I didn't know. And at 6 years old, I contracted poliomyelitis. A lot of you might not know, but there's many different poliomyelitis viruses. And unfortunately, I had the worst. I had the paralytic poliomyelitis, which polio normally only paralyzes your voluntary muscles. It doesn't affect your involuntary muscles like your diaphragm. But with the more serious paralytic poliomyelitis also affects your diaphragm, which means you can't breathe on your own, so you're subject to being in an iron lung. I don't remember much about my life from 6 till 9, except some of the bad stuff. When they first put me in the hospital, I was in total isolation. Nobody could come into the room. My parents couldn't come in. Only people who could come into the room was the doctors. And they told me that, again, that I had a very small chance of surviving. I remember my Uncle Andy giving me my last rites, and I kept hanging in. And when the polio started, it's a slow progress. And my fever was real high, 106, 107. And I remember they used to come in with a big steel tub filled with ice water. And to get my fever down, they would dump me in a tub of ice water for 2 or 3 minutes and put me back in the bed. And when the fever went up again, they'd dump me back in the ice water and put me back in the bed. And this went on for I don't know how long until the fever broke. And after my fever broke, I was in the bed. Of course, I was totally paralyzed, couldn't move anything, and my muscles started contracting, and I was falling up into the fetal position, which just couldn't control anything. So now, they strap my head to the top of the bed, my feet to the bottom with weights on it, and now they come in with a tub of hot water with bags of sawdust, boiling, real hot, and pack my whole body from head to toe with hot sawdust bags to try to get my muscles to loosen up so that they could stretch me back into a normal position. Well, all that got taken care of, then my diaphragm stopped. I wound up in an iron lung for months, I don't know, 2, 3, 4 months, nothing sticking out but your head. These iron lungs were They were huge. I don't know if you know what they are, but it wasn't just a breathing tube that went down your throat. You were actually inside of a tube and nothing sticking out but your head with a big bellows pushing in and out and to push air in your lungs. So I was in the hospital for probably 2 years, and year and a half, 2 years. I don't remember exactly how long. I think the fever, the doctor said, my memory, a lot of my memory's gone. I have flashbacks, bits and pieces of stuff that happened to me in the hospital. But it was a bad time. I was in a ward with 25 or 30 kids, and I know a lot of the kids that I was in a ward with, I'd be talking to at nighttime, and the next day I'd wake up and they'd be gone. And of course they didn't tell us what was going on, but we all knew what happened. And got out of the hospital, and a couple of years later, and then I went through a whole year of rehabilitation at the hospital 3 days a week. So I actually didn't get to start first grade until I was 9 years old. So I was out of place for my whole school years. I was completely out of place. And school was kind of tough. If anybody's ever seen the movie Forrest Gump, you remember when he had the braces from his hip down both legs? Well, that was me. From the time I was 6 until I was like 8 or 9, I had the braces on both legs, and they unlock at the knees, and for me to be able to walk, I had to have the braces locked, and you have to walk stiff-legged. So in school, now you're talking about these kids nowadays said, oh, I'm being picked on and all this stuff. Well, I was picked on every day at school. My nickname, and they call me in school, my nickname was Frankenstein. And the fun thing for the kids to do in school was to knock me down, because they thought it was fun to see me get up, because I had to unlock all those braces to get myself back up on my feet again. And this went on for, a long time. And luckily I had older brothers at home. And when it got too bad, my older brothers would come take care of, well, in Tennessee, you don't call the cops, you call your brother comes, and usually the same guys don't do the same thing twice, because everybody knew the McCarter brothers, and they weren't people to be messed with. And when I got to, when I was 12 years old, my mother was 50. Like I said, I was the 9th of 10 kids. I have a younger sister, and so there was 10 kids. And my father was, a good man. He was an old Irishman, loved his beer. My mother was a good Christian woman. And at 12 years old, she passed away from pancreatic cancer when I was 12. And she was 50 years old, had 10 kids and died at 50. So my father still had me, my younger sister, she was 2 years younger, and my next brother was 2 years older than me. And when I was 14 years old, my father wanted to get out of Tennessee, so we moved to Killeen, Texas, and my father became a civilian contractor for the military, worked at Fort Hood. And about 2 years after that, he decided he didn't want to be in Texas, so he left Texas and went back to Tennessee. Of course, now I'm 16 years old, I'm living in Texas, and I'm on my own. And by this time, my sister had gotten married and had a baby, so I'm taking care of myself, my sister, and still going to school, trying to get an education. I was determined that I was not going to drop out of school. So I worked a full-time job and went to school and took care of my sister, took care of the baby. Got married when I was 21, had 2 children by my first wife, and that marriage lasted 7 years. It was mostly a good marriage, but I always had this big chip on my shoulder, and I was never a physical person. I didn't fight and do physical things, but mentally I could destroy you. I mean, there was no competition. That's the only defense I had was my mental. So I could really upset people mentally. I mean, and most of my life, I was mad at God, for the polio and my mother being taken away, and once my mother passed, everybody in the family just went in all different directions. Stayed married for 7 years and finally wound up with a divorce and had 2 kids. My grandson sitting right back there, Zachary Taylor. He's my firstborn grandson, his mother, Shelley, and my daughter, Stacy. And when my first wife decided to leave, she decided she didn't want to take the kids with her. So I had custody of my kids for 2 years by myself and raised them, as best I could. Got remarried and had second marriage lasted 12 years. My son, Roy, he was born from my second marriage. Divorced again, and like I said, I had this attitude, and I was miserable, and I wanted everybody around me to be miserable, and it was a lot of anger inside me that I didn't know how to deal with. I didn't know what to do. I hadn't, since my mother passed away, I hadn't been in church, hadn't even thought about being in church, and I think I blamed God, and it was hard for me. It really was. Finally, I divorced. My second wife and I divorced, and I was on my own, raising my 2 girls, and unfortunately my oldest daughter got involved in drugs when she was 16, and my youngest daughter was 14, and she was an alcoholic, and bad alcoholic at 14. So I'm going to tough love meetings in Tarpon Springs twice a week, and getting consultations. I'm going to psychiatrists trying to figure out what's on. I never even thought about turning to God. And in 1988, I was working in construction. I was working at Sand Key on a 12-story building. I'd been working there for a couple of months. My whole life had completely fallen apart. I didn't know where I was, what I was doing, where I was going. I didn't really care. Didn't care about anybody. Like I said, I just made people miserable. Everybody that came around me, I didn't want nobody being close to me. I pushed people away because I could do it myself. I can fix my life myself. And I just kept falling deeper and deeper and deeper in the hole. So I was at Sand Key and I was working, and every day at lunchtime I used to go up on top of the building, on the roof, 12 floors up, and eat my lunch by myself. In 1988, my life was just horrible mess, and I just sitting there one day after lunch, and I'd eaten, and I said, well, there's one way to get this, everything over with. So I walked over to the edge of the building, and I was just gonna go over the building. And I actually leaned down and looked to make sure I wasn't gonna fall on anybody. And I didn't see no big lights. I didn't hear no booming voices. The only thing I heard was a little voice in the back of my head that said, this is not the way. So I went back to work, and this was on a Friday. I went home. I don't remember anything that happened on Friday or Saturday. I know that they knew me by my first name at the Pinellas County Suicide Crisis Hotline, because I was on the phone with them constantly, trying, just begging for help. And next thing I knew, and this is the truth, I really don't remember what happened on Friday and Saturday. And next thing I knew, it was Sunday morning, and I lived in Palm Harbor. In between where I lived and where I finally came to my senses, I guess, was Skycrest Baptist Church on Drew Street, which was probably 8 miles from where I lived. And between my house and Skycrest Baptist Church, there was probably 20 churches. But now you have to, I haven't been in church since I was 12 years old. And I wound up sitting at Skycrest Baptist Church when I realized where I was. And I was sitting back on the right-hand side, and there was probably 1,500 people in that church. And I was sitting back in the section with the people from the streets and the cripples and everybody. And Pastor Bob Adams was up giving his sermon, and he was talking about, I don't know what the sermon was. All I remember him talking about was a man in the Bible, a crippled man from the Bible, that had fallen into a deep, deep, dark pit and didn't know how to get out. And that he'd spent his whole life walking through life, picking up rocks, putting them in a sack, picking up rocks, putting them in a sack. And eventually, so many rocks get in the sack, you can't carry them anymore, and you fall. And everybody told me you can't pick yourself up until you hit bottom. Well, that's when I hit bottom. It scared me so bad that he was talking about me. It's like I was the only one in the church, and he was talking about my life, really. It scared me so bad that I left the church. Halfway through the sermon, I got up and left. And I stayed gone for probably a month, didn't even want to go back to the church again, and finally got up the courage, went back to the church, and I went in, and I sat down, and I was sitting there listening to the pastor preach, and it was just amazing. And I actually asked God for 3 things. I asked him for peace, to bring peace into my life, just for myself. And it was like something came over me, and I just changed right there, sitting right there in Skycrest Baptist Church. It's like peace just came over my whole body. And I was in a bad relationship, and I was talking to God. I said, well, I guess I'm like Paul from the Bible. You're just going to have to knock me off my horse and show me with my own eyes something that I can see and I can't argue about mentally with God. I'm having a discussion with God. And within an hour of walking out of the church, I got it. And the third thing I asked for, I'll get to in a little bit. Anyway, I left the church. I continued going to church every Sunday, and my life got a little better, a little better, a little better. But the weekend from the Friday and Saturday and Sunday that I can't tell you about, I want to show you what I did that weekend. On Sunday when I came back from church, I guess I spent Friday night, Saturday, and Saturday night drawing this. And if you notice, it's all black. Shadows, except for one bright spot right there. And I looked at this picture and looked at this picture and looked at this picture. I never use color when I do pencil and charcoal, except for this one picture. And I finally realized this is God telling me that no matter how dark your days, there's always a little light that you can see. And it really helped me tremendously. And there's a little inscription on the back. I don't know where it came from. I might have read it in a book. I don't know, but I'll read you what I wrote on the back of this. Now this was done in 1988. This was during the time, the weekend. This is, my life has fallen down around me before, lots of times for lots of reasons. Usually other people. And most of the time I was fortunate enough to have a large lump of that life hit me on the head and render me numb to the pain and desolation that followed. And I survived, and I lived to love again. But this slow erosion from below or within, it's me falling down around my life because you're still in that life, but not really. And I think I'm talking to God here. And you're out of that life, but not quite. I do all right alone and better together, but I do very poorly when semi-together. In solitude, I do much. In love, I do more. But in doubt, I do nothing at all. And I think that's what I was speaking to God when I was writing this. Now, you remember I told you my life changed. I finally got the big lump off my shoulder. I wasn't trying to drive everybody around me crazy anymore. And once I got back into Skycrest Baptist Church, I was rebaptized. The third thing I asked for is sitting right back there. That's, believe it or not, I had the audacity sitting in that church, in Skycrest Baptist Church, and my third thing that I asked for was that I needed somebody in my life that would accept me for who I am, crippled, downtrodden, somebody that would stick by my side and love me, good, bad, indifferent, with all my bad attitudes, and that would stick beside me and just be there, somebody that I knew I could trust. And I had to wait, and I knew I had to wait, and I did wait. But little did I know that God already knew what I needed. He knew before I decided I was going to jump off the building. He knew what I needed, but he wanted me to ask. And until I got down to the point where I was ready to give up on the world and did ask, that's when he gave me what I wanted. I actually asked God, I said, I'm a stubborn man, I'm bullheaded. I think I need an angel to come and be by my side and watch out for me. And about 5-6 months later, Marty and I met on a blind date. And after we dated, I think we dated for about 6 or 7, 8 months. And we got married, and that was 27 years ago. And my life has been absolutely fantastic since the day that I married her. And I hope that you got something out of this. That's my life story. And you know, it's a tough struggle. But like the Bible says, you know, if I myself would have stuck to what I was raised with, which was the church and the praying and being faithful to God and not trying to do it on my own, I think my life would have been different. I don't know. They say God has our life planned for us. So now I just accept the fact that the things happen to me for a reason. And I'm still here. I'm 71 years old. I'm still working. I'm doing fine. Family's fine. And I'm absolutely love this church. I've been a member of this church since day one when we started the church. And this is where I belong, and I wouldn't have been able to done this even 5 years ago. I would have never been able to share this story. John's asked me for 15 years to share my story, and I'm glad I did, and I hope you enjoyed it, and that's all I have to say. It's God's grace.